Hello and welcome to the video version of my journal. I'm Stephanie Rivers. Come on into the conversation. I am multicasting on several platforms, so you could be watching on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn or even Instagram, on whatever platform you're watching. Welcome to the conversation. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so that when I post new videos, you'll be the first to know. And if you want to comment, you can certainly do so. I am watching in the chat. Now, you know how when you step on a roach and you think that roach is dead, and then you walk away to get some tissue to clean up the dead roach, but when you come back to the roach, it's still alive and it's dragging that smashed leg trying to get away. That's what I think about people like Gregory and Travis McMichael and that other dude, William Roddy Bryant, who got convicted of the hate crime murder of Ahmaud Arbery. They are like roaches that just won't die. And here's why I say that. In addition to the murder conviction in Georgia, they got federal hate crime conviction and kidnapping and weapons conviction in 2021. And as far as Arbery's family was concerned, they got justice for him and for the family. And they were trying to move on with their lives. But just like a roach, when you think it's dead and it's not, you turn your back and it comes back to life. Because now the McMichaels want everyone to believe that they didn't murder Ahmaud Arbery because he was black. And Williams, the third dude, the one who followed behind the McMichaels in his truck and recorded that video that they intended to be a snuff video and that it actually got them convicted. He's trying to separate himself from the McMichaels, saying that he shouldn't have gotten federal hate crime conviction either. So now I guess prison life is tougher than they all thought, because now they're trying to come up with all the reasons in the world as to why their conviction should be overturned. And I know some people will say, well, that's to be expected. But at some point, you would hope in life that some people would just take accountability for what they do. And maybe it's asking too much for me or for people like me to think some people are just going to say, okay, I got convicted, let me just sit on down. But these are not those type of people. So correct me if I'm wrong, but because I earned a master's degree, but it wasn't a law degree. Here's what I do know about the law, though. When it comes to committing crimes that result in the death of someone, even if you didn't pull the trigger, but you were involved in the crime, and then isn't it the law that says results in somebody's death that you get the same punishment just like you pulled the trigger? Isn't that how the law works? So I'm not sure how these Roddy Williams, the third dude, is now trying to separate himself from the McMichaels, saying that, oh, well, they did something, but I didn't necessarily do that same thing. And so that's why I say that racism and roaches are basically, what do roaches and racism have in common? It's hard to kill it. It's hard to kill them, okay? Because they just keep coming back. If you haven't already, be sure to like and share this video, because I'm going to talk to you about some other cases that are coming up that I think you might have heard of or you might not. And so that's why I'm here, just to share the information, because it might be beneficial to you and your family in the end. Now, I'm not sure why I had asked myself, why would an attorney take the time and effort to go through an appeals process such as this over a case that was so widely known and followed? And my first thought was to ask that. But then I read some of the appeals documents. So I don't know if you read some, but essentially the McMichaels are trying to make themselves into law enforcement affiliates based. The same thing that they did during the case that didn't work. Law enforcement affiliated is what their appeal is. Now, if they can make their actions akin to that of a law enforcement officer, that they were patrolling the area, that Aubrey, they tried to stop him and just ask him questions, that they used to work with the Coast Guard, they used to work with the DA's office. Remember, they said all that. They used to, it's like yada, yada, yada. They just keep going on about how their efforts, their actions, their behavior was law enforcement contrived, that it was no malice. But we know that that's not the case. And hopefully the appeals court judges that heard the case will think the same thing and rule accordingly. So why do they want to be law enforcement affiliated? Well, it's because even law enforcement officers get to violate Black people's civil rights in 1920, like it's 1924, even though it's 2024. They move with the same bravado, like they did in 1924. Like they're not going to be held accountable, that they don't have to recognize people's civil rights. But when you start holding these cops and wannabe cops accountable and make them serve the full prison sentence that they get, then they'll start to rethink how they move in these streets. And here are a few examples. Remember Elijah McClain out of Denver, Aurora, Colorado. So if you don't remember, he was walking home from work. It was after dark, and somebody said he looked suspicious. So either the cops rolled up on him talking about he looked suspicious, but it was Aurora, Colorado, and it was cold outside. Okay, so he was basically minding his own business. And they pulled up and asked him, "Let me see your ID. Stop. Let me ask you questions." And he just kept walking. Now, come to find out, he has some type of condition whereby he's like, he doesn't talk much. He doesn't express himself like someone might expect him to. And even so, at that point, it's dark outside. I'm trying to get home. It's probably cold. And he was minding his own business. But the cop still took it upon himself. It was a total of 3 cops. One of them, the one person on the scene, took it upon himself to put Elijah in a chokehold, and then he became unconscious. They ended up calling other cops, total of 3 cops, and the paramedics. And for whatever reason, somebody decided, and the cops instructed the paramedics to administer a type of sedative to Elijah that ended up making him overdose, and he died. This was in 2019. The two of the cops got acquitted of manslaughter, but the one cop who was the senior officer on the scene and the 2 paramedics, they just got convicted and sentenced to 14 months in prison. That's just a year and 2 months for somebody's life, but it's 14 months nonetheless. So let's see how much time they actually serve, because some of these law enforcement officers move like it's 1924 instead of 2024. Here's another one. 5 now former sheriff's deputies in Rankin County, Mississippi, and a Braxton City police officer. So Braxton is in I guess that's called the city center of Rankin County, Mississippi. Okay, so they just got convicted and sentenced to prison for torturing 2 Black men just because they could. Now, if you haven't heard about this, I'm going to explain it to you. So they got sentenced for torturing the 2 Black men. Now they're headed to prison. out of the 6 people who got convicted, they got convicted of between 10 years and 40 years. Now, you might ask yourself, well, why the disparity in the sentencing? I'll get to that. But just know that Rankin County is like the neighboring county of where Jackson, Mississippi is, where Jackson State University is. And so that's where Rankin County, Mississippi is, just so you know about the geography of it. So here's how it went down. Apparently, a white person who knew that these cops, it was 5 sheriff's deputies and 1 city police officer. So a white person who knew them called one of them who he knew was crooked and said, hey, there's 2 black guys who live with a white woman, gave him the address. So the crooked cop called his other crooked friends that were law enforcement officers, and via WhatsApp they got together, and I'm getting all this from court testimony, so I ain't making it up. They got together and said, let's go over there and punish these 2 black guys for living with a white woman. Okay. And this was in 2023. It happened in January 2023, about a year ago and 2 months. Okay. So the crooked cop, they contacted each other via text, WhatsApp, and they said, whatever we do, we don't want to leave any bruises on their faces. So when they take a mug shot, because they knew we were going to go over there, we're going to conspire. So now they're conspiring to do something illegal with their badges in play. Okay. So now, according to the court records, these law enforcement gang members, basically, they kicked in the door of the house where the 2 black men lived. They had no search warrant. They had no probable cause, no legal probable cause for doing that. They just kicked in the door and handcuffed it and arrested them. Now, that's also called illegal search and seizure. It could be called kidnapping. It could be called a whole bunch of stuff. But bottom line is, it was wrong. Okay. So they called the men racial slurs. They kicked them. They punched them. They tased them and assaulted them. And 2 of the gang members, the LEO gang members, they used a sex toy to assault both of the men. Stay tuned for the pictures, because I'm going to show you the pictures of these deranged fools. Okay. So one of the gang members, I just hit my 10,000 steps. Guess because I'm doing all this. Anyway, one of the gang members, the Leo gang members, shot one of the black men in the mouth. Okay. Broke his jaw and severed his tongue. Okay. So while they were, now remember, they claimed they weren't going to leave any physical evidence of what they were doing on the man's faces, but now it's gone out. They done shot the man. His tongue is severed, his jaw is broken, he's bleeding. What do? They go outside and talk about it and say, okay, what's the cover story? What are we going to do here? So again, they wrong on all kind of fronts. Now, so there goes their plan to show no evidence of them abusing these men reason. So that's when the Leo gang members went outside to come up with a cover story, and the cops planted drugs on them, and they also wrote up false charges on the 2 men that stood. These charges stood for months. So this happened in January 2023. Now, around April or May, it starts to unravel, okay? Because all that time, these guys have drug charges against them, which could have put them in prison for a very long time, okay? So, yeah, and then at some point, one of the police officers, or all of them, or some of them, it only took one, threatened to murder the 2 guys if they told. So you breaking in, you breaking heads, you shooting people, you damaging property, and now you said, if you tell the truth, I'm gonna kill you. Okay. So now these cops, I think they pleaded guilty because at some point it came out, one of the cops, that one of the law enforcement officers that was involved started to talk. They, they normally, when a real investigation happens, they start to see who's going to be the weakest link. So they got the weakest link, Leo, gang member, and he started to spill his guts, and then that's how they got to the truth of what happened. So it took until around June for them to get to the truth. But before I get to that part, I want to start showing you some pictures of these people. They were convicted with of conspiracy to commit obstruction of justice. Just a few days ago, they got convicted. So here is where here's who was sentenced. So let me show you these pictures. And while I'm pulling this up, if you haven't already, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so that when I post new videos, you'll be the first to know. So this first picture, because it's a big screen, I mean, it's showing you, but because I'm doing the vertical look on my video, I won't be able to show you all of the pictures at once. So this person, let me see if I can. This guy is Hunter Elward. Hunter Elward. He's 31. He looks older than that, but that's beside my point. 31 years old, and he's a former Rankin County Sheriff's Office deputy. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison for doing all that I just said to the two guys, the two black men in Rankin County, Mississippi. And the two guys who used a sex toy to assault the two guys, here's one, that's the other one. Let me get their names for you. So the first one, because I'm trying to keep it together, this one right here, his name is Christian Damon. He's 29 years old, and he was on the narcotics. He was he's a former narcotics investigator in the Rankin County Sheriff's Office. He was sentenced to 40 years. Now, they sentenced him to 40 years because they said they got him on not just what he did to the two black guys in this case. They got him on some other stuff, so they just combined his sentence. So he's sentenced to 40 years in prison. Now, the other, and he was one of the cops, one of the sheriff's deputies who used a sex toy to assault two other men, okay? The other one who used a sex toy to assault the two men, his name is Daniel Opdyke. He's 28 years old. He's a former sheriff's deputy, and he was sentenced to 17 and a half years in prison. Now, since they like playing with sex toys and stuff so much, let's see how much they like all that when they go to prison, where they're going to be locked up with some people. Now, I would also say that they got one of the higher sentences because of them being narcotics investigators. That means that they, this Christian Damon, the one I showed you before, I'll go back to him. He got 40 years. This guy got 40 years because, in my opinion, he used his access to narcotics to help plant the drugs at this scene, and probably no doubt on some other scenes. And that's why he got 40 years. Okay. So these are the same people who were supposed to be investigating crimes, and they are here committing crimes and planting drugs on people. So yeah, That's who these people are. Now let's see, who else do we have? We have Brett McAlpin. He got 22 and a half years, and he was a chief investigator. Let's take a look at Brett McAlpin, the chief investigator. That's him right there. Okay. So he the chief investigator in Rankin County. So he's supposed to be in charge of investigating other people doing legitimate crimes, and he's out here breaking in people's homes and committing all kind of crimes, and then planting and what's the word I'm looking for? Threatening to kill somebody. Okay. If they tell the truth. These are the law enforcement gang members who worked at the Rankin County Sheriff's Department. Okay. So who else are we looking at? Hunter Elward. Hunter Elward, he got, I think I showed you his picture. That was the one at the bottom who, let me see. Hunter Elward. Let me see. Yeah, I showed you Hunter Elward. Okay. So, and I showed you Joshua Hartford was the Richland Police Department in narcotics investigator. He also, here he is. That was the person who worked with the police department. Okay. So these are some of the, and if you want to see the full picture of everybody, I guess I can try to zoom out so you can see them. But essentially, these are the 6 individuals who call themselves law enforcement. They also named themselves the Goon Squad, okay, in Rankin County, and they, so for them to name themselves says to me that they were used to doing this, okay? So this is not something that they were brand new at doing. And yeah, these are the people who call themselves law enforcement in Rankin County. Now, racism crosses generations because it's taught and accepted. Just like roaches, it adapts to its environment and it lives on. And that's why I say, and that's why I asked the question, what do roaches and racism have in common? They adapt to their environment, and it continues to live on. Because if you look at the ages of these people, they range from, what was it, 27 years old to 50 something years old, 53, 54. So that's 2 generations, okay? And so if you look at probably their fathers and their grandfathers, their kids and their grandkids, they probably treat people the same way, just on a different level. If it's a kid, they're going to be a kid bully. If it's an adult, they're going to bully other adults. If they are in law enforcement, they're going to use their badges to bully and hurt people, because that's just what happens when you disregard, and you have no regard for other people's lives, and you don't think of them as being human. And that's what's going on, and that's why I think that racism and roaches will be around until the end of time. Now, this all happened, like I said, in January of 2023. Now, the 2 black men, let me see if I can show you their pictures. The 2 black men there, they are Michael Corey Jenkins, he's on the right, and Eddie Terrell Parker. So Mr. Jenkins and Mr. Parker. Let me bring up that picture for you. I don't know why it's still showing that, because it should be showing something else. So let me see if I can bring up. So if you haven't already, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so that when I post new videos, you'll be the first to know. All right. So the guy on the right with the cross around his the guy on the right with the cross around his neck, that's Mr. Parker. That's Eddie Terrell. No, I'm sorry. That's Mr. Jenkins, Michael Corey Jenkins on the right. Okay. Now, I'm trying to squeeze my video so I can show it to you. So it's not allowing me to show you. So while I'm having trouble with bringing up the pictures, just know that the person that you are able to see on the right with the blue shirt on with the cross around him, that was one of the guys who got his that was shot. Actually, he was the one who was shot, had his jaw broken and his tongue severed, minding his own business at home. Okay, because some cops that were calling themselves the goon squad came in when he was at home minding his own business with his roommate. Okay, so my point for showing you this is that the two men had the courage to stand up to the racism and tell what really happened. Otherwise, they probably would be on their way to prison, if not already in prison right now. So they got an attorney and an investigation started. And by June of 2023, Rankin County Sheriff Brian Bailey fired all of the deputies, but he never officially said why he fired 6 deputies. Now, I've never been to Rankin County, but from the what I've read and what I know, it ain't that big. Okay, so if you fire 6 people from your department, that's probably going to be big news, and it's probably going to make people ask questions as to why. But the sheriff, didn't feel like he needed to tell anyone why he fired them. Not until August of 2023, when all 6 of the people, including that city police officer, pleaded guilty to conspiracy, and it all came out. Okay, so then the reason that the sheriff didn't want to say this is why I'm firing them is because he was trying to separate himself and separate the department from what they did. But in my opinion, the sheriff already knew what they did, because people on your team, your subordinates, if you will, they don't act like that unless they know that they can get away with it. They don't do stuff like that unless they know that that their behavior is acceptable and that they can act with impunity. And that's what these guys were doing, because they did that. You mean to tell me they call themselves the goon squad? They're on a narcotics team. They plant stuff on people. They come busting without a warrant on people, and you don't know that? That is unbelievable to me. Okay, so the sheriff knew what was going on, in my opinion, because they had a habit of doing that. Now, after the goon squad, that's what they call themselves, they pleaded guilty in August of 2023. Then that's when the sheriff claimed that, oh, they gone rogue. Oh, that was not something that we would put up with. And so you're just going to just fire them, and that's supposed to be the end of the story? That makes no sense. That's another reason why everybody needs to be held accountable. Now, since all of this, the 2 guys, Mr. Jenkins and Mr. Parker, they have filed a $400 million civil lawsuit against the department. So we'll see what happens there. But last November, when the sheriff was supposed to be, well, first they wanted him to resign. They wanted the citizens and Mr. Parker, Mr. Jenkins, they said, look, the sheriff needs to resign because he's at the head of some rotten ass people. Okay, so but he didn't resign. And guess what? In November of last year, he got reelected, y'all. Say it ain't so in Rankin County, Mississippi. Okay. So he got reelected, one, because the citizens reelected him, and two, because nobody ran against him. So now you mean to tell me I'm pretty sure more than one person voted for him. Okay, but it seems like that's all it took for him to get reelected. If you're running unopposed, or maybe if you're running unopposed, nobody has to vote. I don't know how that works. All I know is this: you mean nobody in Rankin County felt like stepping up against this dude, the sheriff, and saying, I can do better, or here's what my platform is, and this is why you should not have him in charge of law enforcement. You mean to tell me there was nobody who felt like they could be better than that dude who was leading a goon squad of of rogue gang member LEOs? It just makes no sense to me. So this is why it's important to stand up for yourself and realize that it's beyond you as to why you should do some things. And if that's not crazy enough, here's something else that's crazy. One of the, either Mr. Parker or Mr. Jenkins, I can't remember which one, they have already come out and said, I forgive you, y'all who tried to kill us and tried to railroad us. They said, I forgive you. Now, ain't that much forgiveness in the world for me. Okay. Now you might be able to look at that and say, oh, the Christian way is, and I know what the Christian way is. I consider myself to be a Christian, but at the same time, I'm a realist, and I would not be, it's not on me to forgive you, especially since the fools didn't even ask for forgiveness. None of them asked for forgiveness. Okay. I think only one of them actually apologized in court because he was probably trying to get a lesser sentence. And when he did apologize in open court, he didn't even look at the two men. He didn't look at Mr. Jenkins and Mr. Parker. He was just saying it just because it sounded good. Okay. So I would not be, and we as Black people need to quit being so forgiving of people who give less than a damn about us, would care less if we lived or died. In fact, they try to kill you. Okay. And then they threatened you to kill you if you told the truth. And now you forgive them. This leads into the feeling, in my opinion, it's the reason why some people feel as if we must be missing some screws. We must be not human sometimes because we say some irrational stuff like, I forgive you, after you pull the trigger in my dang mouth and try to effing kill me. Okay. So there's just some things that are appropriate, and and anger would be the least of an appropriate feeling, emotion at that time. Okay. So, they kicked in your door. They treated you like a roach. They tried to stomp you out. They tried to kill you. They put false charges on you. And then they did it all just because they could. And then you say, I forgive you. So yeah, we need to think about things that before we speak, we need to think about what are the ramifications of this. And one of them would be when they are in prison for about 6 months and they are tired of getting beat up on and somebody else using sex toys on them. Okay. Then they're going to come up with, well, one of the victims said he forgives me. So if he forgives me, then why am I being in here? Because everybody, if they can forgive me, everybody else should. That would be probably a logical. Now, I'm not saying it will work, but at least I could see them saying that. Okay. So I'm not going to give you any ammunition to take you away from the punishment that you deserve for what you did. Okay. It is not about what they did to those two men. It's about justice for all the crooked ass cops who do stuff every day. They are being held accountable for what they did as well as what other people have gone through, and to serve as an example of what will happen and the punishment that could happen if you do this to somebody else. So that's what my opinion is. So that's why I would never tell somebody, I forgive you, because it's not about me forgiving you. It's about you being held accountable and you getting the punishment, and you understanding and other people looking at you and understanding that's not, you shouldn't have done that. And this is what's going to happen if they try to do that same thing to someone else. So it's all about that. So some things are bigger than what they do to the individual. Okay. So putting them in prison with people who probably are guilty of, that they're guilty of putting in there on false charges. Because you know, this wasn't the first time they came up with all these false charges and try to get people to not tell the truth. So it's probably some people in prison right now thinking, yeah, I want to see you. I want to see you in here with me. So yeah, go on and see those people and tell them how sorry you are. So in fact, if you know anybody who is in prison, a family member, friend, anybody in prison, or if you're an attorney in Mississippi and you are thinking, did any of these goon squad gang member LEOs put anybody else in prison? This will be a good time to start getting your appeals together, because if they were involved in any type of conviction of anybody, then those cases should be reopened and looked at, or at least that's a grounds for a review of those cases, because clearly these people are liars and they could have been killers if they would have gotten away with it. Okay. If the bullet would have hit the right way, that man could not be here today. He could be dead. They would have been covering up a murder. Okay. And then they probably would have killed the other guy to keep him from telling. Okay. So they would have been willing to murder two innocent people. I believe it. And I'm sure you believe it too, because that's how they roll. Okay. So that's it. Ain't got no more. If you know anybody in the Rankin County, Mississippi area who's in prison, show them this video, because they need to start looking at an appeals, especially if it was involving any of those goons who were who now have pleaded guilty and are on their way to prison too. So to find out more about the things that I care about, you can go to the written version of my journal. It's at eurweb.com. Thank you so